I knew something was wrong the moment they poured champagne into glasses etched with "Innovation is Velocity." We were at an upscale lakeside resort in Oregon, and the new CEO, a guy with a smile wider than his PowerPoint slides, was speaking as if he'd just reinvented corporate ethics. A few hours later, I was fired in front of 200 people, and they thought I'd stay silent. They were wrong. Very wrong. My name is Natalie Kerr. Until that morning in October, I was vice president of strategic growth at Omnivia Group, a mid-sized tech company that specialized in enterprise software solutions. I'd spent 7 years building their data analytics division from scratch, turning it from a money pit into their most profitable vertical. My bonus was due to vest in 3 weeks, a 7-figure payout that would have set me up for life. But Damon Clive, our new CEO, had other plans. The transformation retreat started like every other corporate boondoggle I'd attended. We flew into Portland on a Thursday morning, then took chartered buses through winding mountain roads to Cascade Lake Resort. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, reflecting off the water like nature's own PowerPoint presentation. It would have been beautiful if not for the artificial fog machines they'd installed around the conference center entrance. Welcome to the future of Omnivia. Damon's voice boomed through hidden speakers as we filed into the main hall. Drones buzzed overhead, projecting holographic logos while indie music pulsed through the floorboards. Everything about him screamed Silicon Valley transplant, the designer stubble, the $400 plain white t-shirt, the way he said disruption like it was a prayer. I found my assigned seat between Maya, my executive assistant, and Derek Cho from Data Analytics. Maya looked nervous, clutching her tablet like a life preserver. She'd only been with me for 6 months, but she'd already proven herself invaluable, sharp, discreet, and loyal to a fault. "This feels different," she whispered as Damon took the stage. She was right. The usual suspects were missing. No board members, no senior VPs from legal or compliance. Just Damon, his hand-picked lieutenants, and 200 employees who'd been deemed essential to transformation. "Family," Damon began, spreading his arms wide. "That's what we are, and families sometimes need tough love." The lights dimmed. A presentation flickered to life behind him, stock photos of rockets launching, mountains being climbed, chess pieces toppling, corporate theater at its finest. "Omnivia has been coasting," he continued, pacing the stage like a caged predator. "We've been comfortable, safe, but comfort is the enemy of greatness." I'd heard this speech before, in various forms, from every McKinsey-trained executive who'd ever darkened our doorstep. But something in Damon's delivery made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way his eyes never quite focused on anyone, or how his smile never reached beyond his mouth. "Today, we begin Operation Phoenix. We're burning down the old Omnivia and building something extraordinary from the ashes." The crowd stirred uneasily. Burning down companies rarely ended well for the people inside them. To achieve this transformation, we need to make some difficult decisions. We need to remove obstacles. We need to eliminate redundancies. We need to... He paused for effect. "Optimize our human capital." There it was. The corporate euphemism that meant someone was about to get screwed. "Natalie Kerr," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "Would you please stand?" Every head in the room swiveled toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. But I stood slowly, keeping my expression neutral. In corporate warfare, showing fear is admitting defeat. "Natalie has been with Omnivia for 7 years," Damon announced. "She's built our data analytics division into what it is today. Let's give her a round of applause." The room clapped hesitantly, sensing a trap. I remained standing, my hands steady at my sides. "Unfortunately," Damon continued, his voice dripping with false regret, "Natalie represents the old way of thinking, the cautious way, the way that asks why instead of why not. And that's why, effective immediately, her position has been eliminated." The words hit like physical blows. Eliminated, not transferred, not restructured, eliminated, like I was a line item on a spreadsheet. Security will escort you out, he added casually, already moving on to his next slide. Thank you for your service. Two men in black blazers appeared at my elbows. Not our usual security-hired muscle brought in specifically for this moment. They didn't touch me. But their presence made it clear I had no choice. Maya gasped beside me, tears already forming in her eyes. Derek stared at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. Around the room, faces reflected a mixture of shock, relief that it wasn't them, and guilty fascination. This was corporate execution as performance art, and they were all complicit audience members. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I didn't give Damon the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I gathered my blazer from the back of my chair, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward the exit with my head high. The security guards flanked me like pallbearers at a funeral. The walk to the conference center entrance felt endless. My heels clicked against the polished floor, the sound echoing in the artificial silence. Behind me, I could hear Damon resuming his presentation, already erasing me from Omnivia's future. Outside, a golf cart waited the final indignity. They couldn't even let me walk to my cabin with dignity. As the cart pulled away, I saw faces pressed against the conference center windows. Some looked sympathetic, most looked relieved. The driver, a kid who couldn't have been older than 20, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I'm sorry, he finally mumbled. This seems messed up. It is, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He dropped me at my cabin, where two more security guards waited with boxes. They'd already packed my belongings, laptop, personal items, 7 years of my life condensed into cardboard. A termination packet sat on top. My name misspelled on the cover. Even in ending my career, they couldn't bother with basic accuracy. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises, one guard informed me. A car will take you to the airport. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. They left me alone with my boxes and the ruins of my career. That's when the rage hit. Not hot and explosive, but cold and crystalline. They'd orchestrated this humiliation, perfectly public execution, immediate exile, no chance to say goodbye or transition my projects. They wanted me to disappear quietly, to slink away in shame. They'd miscalculated. I pulled out my personal phone and started documenting everything. The termination packet, the packed boxes, the view from the cabin window where my former colleagues were still trapped in Damon's transformation theater. Evidence. Because this wasn't just about wrongful termination, something else was happening here. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't leave yet. Meet me at the boathouse in 20 minutes. VL. Victor Langley, the largest shareholder and former chairman of the board. The man Damon had maneuvered out 6 months ago in what the business press called a bloodless coup. Maybe not so bloodless after all. I waited exactly 20 minutes, then slipped out the back of my cabin. The security guards were stationed at the front, probably assuming I was inside crying into my severance package. Instead, I made my way through the woods toward the lake, my heels sinking into pine needles with every step. The boathouse stood at the end of a wooden pier, weathered and authentic in a way nothing else at the resort was. Victor Langley waited inside, a sharp silhouette against the afternoon light reflecting off the water. Ms. Kerr, he said without turning around. I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting. Victor Langley was everything Damon Clive pretended to be. 73 years old, he'd built Omnivia from a garage startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. Where Damon was all flash and buzzwords, Victor was substance and quiet power. He'd stepped down as CEO 5 years ago, but remained chairman until Damon's coup. Mr. Langley, I replied. I assume this isn't a social call. He turned then, and I saw the same cold rage in his eyes that I felt in my chest. No, it's a business proposition. He gestured to a wooden bench, and we sat facing the lake. Up the hill, I could see the conference center, its glass walls revealing the ant-like movements of my former colleagues. Damon Clive is destroying my company, Victor said without preamble. Not through incompetence, but through deliberate fraud. I believe he's cooking the books, inflating growth numbers, and preparing to sell Omnivia based on fabricated valuations. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a hypothesis based on observable data. He pulled out a folder, weathered hands steady despite his age. 3 months ago, Damon announced record growth in our enterprise sales division, but I still have friends in accounting. The numbers don't add up. I studied the documents he handed me. Revenue projections that jumped 300% quarter over quarter. Customer acquisition costs that had somehow dropped to near zero. Growth metrics that belonged in a fantasy novel, not a financial report. He's also been systematically eliminating anyone who might question these numbers. Victor continued. The head of internal audit gone. The CFO who'd been with us for 15 years replaced with one of Damon's people. And now you, who knows our data analytics inside and out. Why come to me, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because you're angry. Because you're brilliant. And because you no longer have anything to lose. He leaned back, studying me with eyes that had seen decades of corporate warfare. I need someone who understands the internal systems, someone who can help me prove what Damon's doing before he destroys everything I built. You want me to help you take him down? I want you to help me save Omnivia. Taking Damon down is just a necessary step. I thought about my team, about Maya crying as I was escorted out, about 7 years of work dismissed with a PowerPoint slide, but I also thought about the risk. Corporate whistleblowing rarely ended well for the whistleblower. I appreciate the offer, but... Check your LinkedIn, Victor interrupted. I pulled out my phone and navigated to my profile. It was gone. Not just deactivated, completely erased. My stomach dropped as I checked other platforms, Twitter, industry forums, even my bio on conference websites where I'd spoken. All gone. He's erasing you, Victor said quietly, making sure you can't contradict whatever story he's spinning about your departure. By tomorrow, it'll be like you never existed at Omnivia. The cold rage crystallized into something harder. What do you need from me? Victor smiled for the first time, and I understood why he'd built an empire. I need evidence, real data that proves the fraud. I have board allies, but they need more than suspicions to act. I don't have access anymore. They took my laptop, deactivated my credentials. But you have something more valuable. You have relationships. People who trust you. People who might be willing to share what they've seen. Maya, Derek, Eli from engineering. Others who'd watched Damon's transformation with growing unease. He was right, I had a network, even if I no longer had access. If I do this, I said slowly, I need guarantees, legal protection, financial backing if Damon comes after me. Already arranged. My lawyers are on standby. And I've set aside a fund for expenses. He stood, straightening his jacket. But Ms. Kerr, understand what you're signing up for. Damon Clive didn't get where he is by playing nice. He'll try to destroy you. He already has, I replied. The question is whether I return the favor. Victor handed me a business card, not his corporate one, but a plain white card with just a phone number. When you have something concrete, call me. Until then, we've never met. He left first, walking up the pier with the measured steps of a man who'd learned patience the hard way. I waited 10 minutes, watching the sun sink toward the lake before returning to my cabin. The security guards barely glanced at me as I loaded my boxes into the waiting town car. They thought they were watching a beaten woman slink away in defeat. They were wrong. As the car wound through the mountains toward Portland, I started making plans. Damon Clive had made a critical error. He'd created an enemy with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. He'd fired me before my bonus vested, humiliated me in front of my peers, and tried to erase my professional existence. But he'd forgotten one thing. Data has a way of surviving, even when people try to delete it. And I'd spent 7 years learning exactly where Omnivia buried its bodies. The war was just beginning. Back in Portland, I checked into a hotel under a fake name, paranoid maybe, but Victor's warnings echoed in my head. My corporate apartment was paid through the end of the month, but I couldn't risk going there yet. I needed to think, to plan, to transform my rage into strategy. The termination packet made for interesting reading. Beyond the standard severance terms, 2 weeks per year of service, health insurance through year end, there were unusual clauses, non-disparagement agreements with financial penalties, broader non-compete language than industry standard. And buried on page 47, something that made my blood run cold, a clause stating that any proprietary information I developed at Omnivia belonged to the company in perpetuity, with my name to be removed from all patents and publications. They weren't just firing me, they were trying to erase my contributions entirely. My phone buzzed. Maya, texting from her personal number. I'm so sorry, this is wrong, everyone knows it. I started to reply, then stopped. If Damon was as thorough as he seemed, he'd be monitoring communications. Instead, I texted back, thanks, take care of yourself. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, check your personal email, from your biggest fan. I frowned but opened my email. There was a message from Definitely Fan 2023, a Proton Mail. Calm. Maya's intentional misspelling made me smile despite everything. The subject line read, Vacation Photos, but the attachment was a zip file labeled Memories. Inside were dozens of documents, financial reports, email chains, presentation decks all related to something called Project Quantaris. I'd never heard of it, which was strange considering I was supposed to be involved in all strategic growth initiatives. I started reading, and my anger transformed into something colder. Project Quantaris was supposedly a revolutionary AI-driven analytics platform that Omnivia had been developing in secret. According to these documents, it was already in beta with 3 Fortune 500 companies, generating millions in recurring revenue. Except I knew every line of code in our analytics division. I'd hired every engineer, reviewed every project proposal. Quantaris didn't exist. But on paper, it was our fastest-growing product. I called Victor's number. Yes, his voice was carefully neutral. We need to meet. I have something. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Pioneer Courthouse Square. Southeast corner, by the food carts. Public, crowded, impossible to bug. Victor Langley hadn't survived decades in business by being careless. I spent the rest of the night documenting everything Maya had sent, creating backups, cross-referencing claims with my memory of real projects, building a timeline of when Quantaris had supposedly launched. The more I dug, the more fantastic it became. According to these documents, Quantaris had capabilities that would make Google jealous, all developed by a skunkworks team that conveniently consisted of contractors who'd since left the company. It was brilliant in its audacity. Create a phantom product, attribute it to people who couldn't contradict you, use it to inflate valuations. Who would question success? The next afternoon, I found Victor at the food carts as promised, ostensibly buying coffee from a local vendor. He looked like any other Portland retiree in his Columbia jacket and comfortable shoes. Walk with me, he said, handing me a coffee I hadn't ordered. We strolled through the square, 2 strangers having a casual conversation. I told him about Quantaris, showed him key documents on my phone. His expression never changed, but I saw his knuckles whiten around his coffee cup. This is bigger than I thought, he said finally. If he's fabricating entire product lines, he's not doing it alone. This requires cooperation from finance, probably some board members, definitely the new CFO. What do you need? Access to the real data, the actual revenue numbers, not the fantasy he's selling. And we need to find out who else knows. Victor nodded slowly. I can get you financial data through my contacts. As for who else knows. He paused, watching a street musician tune his guitar. Damon fires people for 2 reasons. Either they're obstacles to his plan, or they know too much. Make a list of everyone terminated in the last 6 months. Find the pattern. He was right. I'd been so focused on my own termination, I hadn't seen the bigger picture. Who else had Damon eliminated? There's something else, I said. The termination agreement has unusual clauses about intellectual property. He's trying to claim ownership of everything I've created, retroactively removing my name. Which means he plans to use your work for something. Or he's afraid you'll use it against him. Victor finished his coffee and tossed it in a recycling bin. Be careful, Ms. Kerr. Men like Damon don't just destroy careers, they destroy people. Document everything. Trust no one except those who've already been burned. He left me standing by the Starbucks, watching Portland's afternoon crowd flow past. Somewhere in the city, Damon Clive was probably celebrating his successful transformation retreat, confident he'd eliminated another obstacle. He had no idea what he'd actually done. Over the next week, I became a digital archaeologist, using LinkedIn's cached pages, industry newsletters, and good old-fashioned phone calls. I built a map of Damon's terminations. The pattern Victor predicted emerged clearly. Samira Hale, Senior Product Manager. Fired for cultural misalignment, 2 weeks after questioning revenue projections in a board meeting. Derek Cho, my former colleague from data analytics. Terminated for performance issues, despite stellar reviews. Eli Granger, head of engineering, dismissed for strategic redundancy after raising concerns about product roadmaps that didn't match reality. All of them had touched pieces of the Quantaris puzzle without realizing it. I reached out carefully, using burner emails and encrypted messaging apps. The responses were immediate and angry. Samira had been documenting discrepancies for months before her termination. Derek had actual database queries showing the gap between reported and real numbers. Eli had proof that the engineering resources allocated to Quantaris were being used for other projects entirely. We met in a dingy bar in Southeast Portland. 4 corporate refugees nursing beers and grievances. He had me sign an NDA, Samira said, her usually perfect hijab slightly askew after 3 drinks. Said if I violated it, he'd sue me into bankruptcy. Same, Derek added. Plus threats about industry blacklisting, made it clear I'd never work in tech again if I talked. Eli just stared into his beer. Of all of us, he'd fallen hardest. His H-1B visa had been tied to Omnivia. Without the job, he had weeks before he'd have to leave the country. What if I told you, I said slowly, that we could take him down all the way down, but it would require risk. Real risk. I'm already ruined, Eli said quietly. What's left to risk? The others nodded. We'd all been successful, comfortable, secure. Damon had taken that away with PowerPoint slides and corporate speak. Now we had nothing left to lose. I laid out what I knew about Quantaris, showed them Maya's documents and Victor's suspicions. As the pieces came together, their expressions shifted from anger to disbelief to determination. We need more, Samira said, her strategic mind already working. Financial documents, board communications, anything that proves intentional fraud. I might still have access, Derek said hesitantly. I built a backdoor into the analytics system years ago. For debugging purposes, never documented it, never told anyone. We all stared at him. It was before Damon, he defended. Back when we actually cared about fixing problems instead of hiding them. Can you get in without being traced? I asked. Maybe, probably, if I'm careful and quick. We spent the next hour planning. Derek would extract what data he could. Samira would reach out to her network, finding other terminated employees with pieces of the puzzle. Eli would document the technical impossibilities of Quantaris, creating a report that no legitimate engineer could refute. And I would coordinate with Victor, building a case that even Damon's board allies couldn't ignore. As we prepared to leave, Eli raised his beer. To revenge served cold. To justice, Samira corrected. To getting our lives back, Derek added. I raised my glass last. To burning down their house of cards. We drank. 4 strangers bound by shared betrayal and a dangerous plan. Outside, Portland's rain had started again, washing the streets clean. But some stains, I thought, required more than water to remove. The next phase required patience, not my strong suit when anger burned this hot. But Victor had been clear we needed ironclad evidence, not suspicions. So while my team gathered data, I worked on a different angle. Maya continued feeding me information, careful to use only her personal devices and encrypted channels. The transformation retreat had ended with 17 more terminations, all following Damon's public execution playbook. The remaining employees were terrified, productivity plummeting as everyone waited for the next axe to fall. He's brought in consultants, she told me during a carefully orchestrated, accidental meeting at a coffee shop. McKinsey people. They're interviewing everyone, documenting processes. He's looking for more targets. I translated. Or building plausible deniability for what comes next. Maya slid a folder across the table. Quarterly board meeting is in 3 weeks. He's promising a revolutionary announcement about Omnivia's future. Inside the folder was a draft presentation, watermarked, confidential in blood-red letters. My blood chilled as I read. Damon wasn't just inflating numbers, he was preparing to sell Omnivia to a European conglomerate called Bryanex Industries. The valuation, 3 times what the company was actually worth, based largely on Quantaris's phantom revenue. This is it, I breathed. He's cashing out before anyone realizes the fraud. There's more, Maya said, glancing around nervously. I heard him on a call yesterday. He said, and I quote, "The Kerr problem has been handled. She won't be a factor." The Kerr problem. Like I was a bug to be squashed rather than a person whose life he'd destroyed. That night, Derek's backdoor paid off. He extracted 3 years of real financial data before the system locked him out. The numbers were damning. While reported revenue showed steady growth, actual sales had been flat or declining. Customer churn was through the roof. The only thing keeping Omnivia afloat was creative accounting and phantom products like Quantaris. He's not just committing fraud, Derek explained, his face pale in the glow of multiple monitors. He's strip mining the company, taking out massive loans against inflated assets, paying himself and his inner circle huge bonuses, setting up the perfect exit before it all collapses. Eli's technical analysis was equally devastating. He'd documented 17 different features that Quantaris supposedly offered. Each one was either technically impossible with current technology or would require resources Omnivia demonstrably didn't have. It's like claiming you've invented faster-than-light travel, he explained. Sounds impressive until someone who understands physics looks closely. Samira had found 12 more terminated employees with pieces of the story. All had signed NDAs, but all were willing to talk anonymously. The picture they painted was consistent. Damon had systematically eliminated anyone who might question his numbers while replacing them with loyalists who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. We had our evidence, now we needed a plan to use it. Victor and I met again, this time in the back room of a bookstore he owned through a shell company. Surrounded by first editions and the smell of old paper, we laid out our strategy like generals planning a campaign. A direct assault won't work, Victor said. Damon has allies on the board, and they're all getting rich from this fraud. They'll close ranks if we attack openly. So we don't attack the fortress, I said. We make them open the gates themselves. Victor smiled. What did you have in mind? Damon's ego is his weakness. He truly believes he's the smartest person in any room. So we give him a room where he can prove it. I outlined my plan. We'd create a fake investment firm interested in Quantaris. Damon wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to brag about his phantom product. We'd record everything, get him to make claims that could be easily disproven. Then we'd present it to the board alongside our other evidence. It's risky, Victor mused. If he suspects anything, he won't. His arrogance won't let him. Plus, I'll be nowhere near it. He thinks I'm a handled problem. Remember? Victor nodded slowly. I know someone who can help. A friend who runs a legitimate venture fund. He owes me a favor. Within a week, Veritas Delta. Investment partners existed on paper, website, LinkedIn profiles, even a tasteful office in downtown Portland. All perfectly legitimate except for one detail: its newest associate, N. Reeves, looked nothing like Natalie Kerr thanks to a professional makeup artist and a very expensive wig. The approach to Damon was textbook venture capital, an email expressing interest in Omnivia's innovative analytics solutions, a request for a preliminary discussion about potential synergies, the kind of vague corporate speak that could mean anything and everything. Damon bit immediately. The video call was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I sat in the fake office, heart pounding despite my disguise. Two legitimate partners from Victor's friend's firm flanked me, adding authenticity. Hidden cameras recorded from multiple angles. Every word would be documented. Damon appeared on screen promptly at 2 p.m., his smile bright enough to power a small city. "Gentlemen, lady, thank you for your interest in Omnivia," he began. "I understand you're particularly intrigued by our Quantaris platform." "Indeed," the senior partner replied smoothly. "We've heard remarkable things. But naturally, we'd like to hear directly from you about its capabilities." What followed was 45 minutes of the most spectacular lies I'd ever witnessed. Damon described Quantaris in loving detail, claiming partnerships with companies I knew hadn't even evaluated our products. He quoted performance metrics that violated the laws of computing. He promised ROI that would make Bernie Madoff blush. "How many active users do you currently have?" I asked, pitching my voice lower than usual. "Over 3 million and growing exponentially," Damon replied without hesitation. "We're adding roughly 100,000 per week." I made a note, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Our entire customer base across all products was less than $500,000. And the technical architecture, the other partner probed. "What makes Quantaris so revolutionary?" Damon launched into a description that sounded like science fiction. Quantum computing elements. AI that could predict market trends with 97% accuracy. Real-time processing of unstructured data at a scale that would require more servers than Omnivia owned. "Fascinating," the senior partner said. "We'd love to see a demo." For the first time, Damon hesitated. "Of course. Though you understand, given the proprietary nature of the technology, we'd need to move forward with NDAs and formal partnership discussions first. Naturally, we'll have our legal team reach out." The call ended with mutual expressions of interest and promises to follow up. As soon as the screen went dark, I ripped off the wig and took my first full breath in an hour. "Did we get it?" I asked the senior partner, Richard, Victor's friend. He grinned. "Every beautiful, fraudulent word. That bit about quantum computing, my MIT classmates would die laughing. We had him on video, making claims that weren't just exaggerations, but outright fabrications. Combined with the financial data, the terminated employees' testimonies, and Eli's technical analysis, it was enough to bury him. But I'd underestimated Damon Clive. The next morning, my personal email filled with messages from colleagues, friends, even distant acquaintances, all asking variations of the same question. Is it true? With growing dread, I opened a link someone had sent, an article on a tech gossip site, sourced to an anonymous insider, claiming I'd been fired for embezzling funds from Omnivia. The story was light on details but heavy on insinuation. It painted me as a bitter ex-employee who'd stolen proprietary information on her way out the door. My phone rang. "Victor." "I've seen it," I said without preamble. "My lawyers are already on it. We'll demand a retraction, but the damage is done. He's trying to discredit me before we can move." Which means he knows something. Be careful. Natalie, check your apartment, your car. Trust nothing. I hadn't been back to my corporate apartment since the termination, but my lease ran through month end. Time to collect my belongings and see what other surprises Damon might have left. The building's concierge greeted me nervously. Clearly, Verby, pretty sour of my changed status. I kept my head high as I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, key card still somehow working. My apartment looked untouched at first glance. Same minimalist furniture, same view of the river, same corporate sterility I'd never bothered to personalize. But something felt off. I found the first camera in the smoke detector, tiny and wireless. The second in the bathroom vent, the third behind a picture frame. They'd bugged my home, probably hoping to catch me with stolen documents or meeting with competitors. Instead of destroying them, I left them in place. Let Damon watch me pack boxes and water dead plants. Let him think he was still in control. But I did one thing for the camera's benefit. I called my mother in Ohio, telling her tearfully about my termination and the false accusations. I mentioned considering legal action but worried I couldn't afford it. I played the broken victim perfectly. "I just want to move on," I said loudly near the bedroom camera. "Maybe I should just take the severance and disappear." If Damon was watching, he'd relax. The Kerr problem was handling itself. 2 days later, the board meeting approached. Victor had shared our evidence with Eleanor Drake, the longest-serving board member after himself. She'd been appalled but cautious, requesting time to verify our claims independently. "She's on our side," Victor assured me. "But she needs 2 more votes to call for an emergency session." Those votes came from unexpected sources. The pension fund representative, furious about the embezzlement story that made their due diligence look sloppy. And surprisingly, Damon's own hand-picked CFO, who'd apparently discovered the Quantaris fraud independently and was terrified of personal liability. The night before the board meeting, I met with my team one last time. We'd done everything possible. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies damning, the technical analysis irrefutable. But corporate boards had ignored worse to protect their own interests. "Whatever happens tomorrow," I told them, "you should all be proud. You stood up when it mattered." "We're not done yet," Samira said fiercely. "This isn't over until he's gone." Derek raised his beer. We'd returned to our dingy bar for symmetry. "To tomorrow." "To justice," Eli added. "To the truth," Samira continued. I raised my glass last, to showing them what happens when you create enemies with nothing left to lose. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. at Omnivia's headquarters. I wasn't invited, of course, but Victor kept me updated via encrypted messages. The first hour preceded normally financial reports, strategic updates, Damon's smooth assurances that transformation was proceeding perfectly. Then Eleanor Drake asked about Quantaris. "I've been reviewing the technical specifications," she said innocently. "Some of the claims seem quite ambitious. Could you elaborate on the quantum computing elements?" Damon launched into his spiel, confident and condescending. He didn't notice the other board members exchanging glances, didn't see Eleanor's trap until it was too late. "Fascinating," Eleanor said when he finished. "Then you won't mind explaining this." She played the Veritas Delta video on the conference room screen. Damon's face went white as he watched himself lie boldly and repeatedly. When it ended, the room was silent. "I can explain," he began. "Please do," Eleanor said coldly. "And while you're at it, perhaps you can explain these financial discrepancies, or this technical analysis showing Quantaris is physically impossible, or the testimonies from 17 terminated employees, all describing a pattern of fraud." The CFO stood abruptly. "I need to state for the record that I was unaware of these issues and am prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation." Like rats fleeing a sinking ship, Damon's allies began distancing themselves, but he wasn't finished yet. "This is a setup," he snarled. "Orchestrated by Victor and that criminal Natalie Kerr. She stole proprietary information, and now she's using it to..." "To what?" a new voice interrupted. "To expose your fraud." I walked into the boardroom, having been waiting outside for Victor's signal. Every head turned, but I kept my eyes on Damon. His face cycled through surprise, rage, and something that might have been fear. "You can't be here," he said. "Security." "Ms. Kerr is here at my invitation," Eleanor said calmly. "As a witness to your systematic destruction of this company." I placed a thick folder on the table. 3 years of falsified reports, phantom products, embezzled funds disguised as bonuses. It's all here, with documentation. "This is illegally obtained," Damon protested. "Stolen by a disgruntled ex-employee who was terminated 3 weeks before her bonus vested." I interrupted. "Who was publicly humiliated to silence her. Who discovered you were planning to sell Omnivia based on lies that would destroy thousands of jobs when the truth came out? The board members were reading now, their expressions shifting from skepticism to horror. The pension fund representative looked ready to commit violence. I motioned for the immediate termination of Damon Clive as CEO, Eleanor announced. All in favor. One by one, hands rose. Even Damon's supposed allies voted against him, seeing which way the wind was blowing. Only Damon himself didn't vote, sitting frozen as his carefully constructed empire crumbled. Motion carried, Eleanor said with satisfaction. Security, please escort Mr. Clive from the building. Legal, prepare for a comprehensive audit. And someone, please apologize to our employees for this catastrophe. Damon stood slowly, his perfect smile finally gone. He looked at me with naked hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. I'll destroy you. You already tried, I replied. How'd that work out? Security led him away, his designer shoes clicking on the marble floor. The sound reminded me of my own heels during that long walk at the retreat. But this time, I wasn't the one leaving in disgrace. Ms. Kerr, Eleanor addressed me. On behalf of the board, I apologize for what you've endured. We'd like to discuss your immediate reinstatement with full back pay and vested bonuses. I'd imagined this moment during my darkest nights. The vindication, the reversal of fortune, the triumphant return. But standing there, I felt only tired. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I need time to consider. Omnivia has work to do to rebuild trust not just with me, but with everyone Damon hurt. Eleanor nodded. We're prepared to offer you the interim CEO position while we search for permanent leadership. The room went silent. From terminated VP to potential CEO. In one morning, it was the kind of corporate fairy tale that never actually happened. I'll take interim, I said finally. 3 months to stabilize the company and implement real transparency. After that, we'll see. As the board meeting dissolved into chaos, emergency committees forming, lawyers being summoned, press statements being drafted, I stepped onto the executive balcony. Portland stretched below, gray and rain-washed and honest in a way Damon had never been. Maya appeared beside me, having somehow talked her way past security. You did it, she said softly. We did it, I corrected. All of us who refused to stay silent. What happens now? I thought about the work ahead. Unwinding Damon's lies, rebuilding employee trust, possibly saving a company from the fraud that had nearly destroyed it. It would be harder than anything I'd done before. Now, I said, we clean up the mess, and we make sure nothing like this happens again. But Damon Clive wasn't done. Over the next week, as I worked 18-hour days trying to stabilize Omnivia, he launched a media offensive. Lawsuits alleging wrongful termination. Leaked emails carefully edited suggesting I'd orchestrated a coup. Anonymous blog posts claiming I'd had an inappropriate relationship with Victor Langley. Each attack required response, draining time and energy I needed for rebuilding. But my team now expanded to include many of the terminated employees we'd reinstated rallied around me. He's desperate, Samira observed during one late-night strategy session. Throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Let him, Derek said. We have the truth, and the evidence, and the SEC filing I submitted yesterday. That filing would prove to be Damon's final undoing. Federal investigators, alerted to potential securities fraud, began their own investigation. They found more than even we had discovered. Offshore accounts, bribes to analyst firms, a web of deception that stretched far beyond Omnivia. 6 weeks after the board meeting, I was reviewing real financial projections, depressing but honest, when Eleanor knocked on my door. They arrested him this morning, she said simply. Federal agents at his home. It's all over the news. I pulled up the footage on my computer. Damon Clive, the man with the perfect smile and designer stubble, being led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, his charm useless against federal prosecutors. How do you feel? Eleanor asked. I considered the question. Vindicated, satisfied, relieved. Tired, I said honestly, and ready to focus on building rather than tearing down. The 3 months passed quickly. We downsized Omnivia responsibly, admitting our real capabilities rather than chasing phantom growth. We settled lawsuits from customers who'd been promised impossible technology. We rebuilt our culture around transparency and accountability. Stock price plummeted initially, but honest companies attract honest investors. By month 3, we were smaller but stable, with a clear path to sustainable growth. The day my interim appointment ended, the board offered me the permanent CEO position. I turned it down. "You've earned it," Eleanor protested. "The employees trust you. The investors trust you." "Which is why I'm recommending Samira Hale," I replied. "She has the vision and the integrity to lead Omnivia forward. I was the wartime CEO. She'll be better for peacetime." I stayed long enough to ensure a smooth transition, then cleaned out my office properly this time, with no security escort. Maya helped me pack, now serving as chief of staff to the new CEO. "Where will you go?" she asked. "I'm starting a consulting firm," I said, "helping companies identify and prevent corporate fraud. Turns out I have a knack for it." She handed me one last item, a flash drive. "What's this?" "Every email Damon sent during his tenure, legal cleared it for your records, in case you ever doubt what you accomplished here." I pocketed the drive but knew I'd never look at it. The past was done. Damon was facing 20 years in federal prison. Omnivia was healing. The truth had won, eventually. As I walked through the lobby for the last time, employees stopped to shake my hand, to thank me, to wish me well. No golf cart exile this time, no public humiliation, just respect, earned the hard way. Outside, Portland's ever-present rain had stopped, and weak sunlight broke through the clouds. My car waited at the curb. My own car, not a corporate town car. I'd bought it with the bonus that finally vested, every penny earned. Before driving away, I looked back at Omnivia's headquarters. Damon had tried to destroy me in that building. Instead, he'd created his own destroyer. "Innovation is velocity," I murmured, remembering his opening speech at the retreat. But karma is patient. 6 months later, my consulting firm had more clients than I could handle. Companies wanting fraud audits, executives seeking whistleblower protections, boards needing independent investigations. My team, yes. I'd hired Derek, Eli, and others worked from a converted warehouse in southeast Portland, far from the corporate gleam of downtown. We were reviewing a particularly complex case when Maya forwarded me an article from the Financial Times. Damon Clive had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with millions in restitution. The article included a photo from the courtroom. He looked haggard, his perfect smile replaced by a scowl. But it was the last paragraph that made me smile. The investigation was initiated after former Omnivia VP Natalie Kerr exposed systematic fraud at the company. Ms. Kerr, who now runs a successful corporate integrity consulting firm, declined to comment on the sentencing. I had declined to comment. There was nothing left to say. The man who'd thought he could erase me had instead written himself out of the story. The executives who'd applauded my public termination now paid me substantial fees to protect their companies from similar scandals. Life has a sense of irony that fiction could never match. That evening, I met Victor Langley for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. He'd returned as chairman emeritus of Omnivia, helping Samira navigate the company's recovery. "You could have had it all," he said over wine. "CEO, stock options, the corporate throne." "I did have it all," I replied. "Power, prestige, the corner office, and I learned it could be taken away with a PowerPoint slide. Now I have something better. Which is freedom, purpose, the knowledge that I stood up when it mattered." He raised his glass. "To standing up?" "To knocking down those who deserve it," I countered. We drank. Two warriors sharing stories after the battle. Outside, Portland flowed on, indifferent to corporate dramas and personal vendettas. But in one small corner of the business world, people would remember sometimes the fired fight back, sometimes the erased return to write the final chapter. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you destroy in public becomes the architect of your very public destruction. Damon Clive had taught me many things during his brief, destructive tenure at Omnivia. But the most important lesson was one he'd never intended: when you create an enemy with nothing left to lose, you better make sure they stay down. Because if they get back up, if they find allies and evidence and the courage to fight, well, then you better hope your house isn't made of cards. Mine wasn't anymore. I'd rebuilt it in stone, mortared with truth and reinforced by justice. And from its windows, I could see clearly now both the corporate landscape I'd left behind and the better path ahead. The bonus had finally vested. The truth had finally won. And somewhere in a federal prison, a man with a perfect smile was learning that innovation might be velocity, but revenge is patient, thorough, and served exactly as cold as it needs to be.